Previously on The Walking Dead. Our expedition reached its second half as I scraped the barrel for mysteries surrounding Javier's story in A New Frontier. I'm glad we got it out of the way, since at one point I was considering skipping over it in favour of my beloved Season 4. We talked about character dynamics and romance, and we discussed the future of Javi and his family post Richmond's inevitable collapse, whenever that may have been. However, it's time we finally deep dive into the final season, my long-term personal favourite for many reasons. I think it's purely the atmosphere and the contained, heartwarming setting above anything else. Sitting alongside Season 1 as two of my favourite games of all time, ironically there's like 1,000 mysteries in this game for some reason, and I'd like to cover as much of these as possible in this video, so thanks again for watching, and to all those who have been here since Season 1.
Blocked off. Kids must have not wanted anyone to get through there.
When we wake up in Erickson's boarding school, there's a lot of creepy things that we can notice, notably rebellious propaganda drawn on the walls, even etched into the glass of an empty trophy cabinet. After Marlon tells us more about the adult staff who abandoned the kids when the outbreak started, justifying these slogans seen all over the school and introducing ourselves to most of the students, we're free to roam around in the courtyard before eating dinner. It's here where we encounter mystery number 1. There's a gate on the right hand side of the dormitories. Quite hard to find on top of being closed off indefinitely. It's also reinforced with sheets of metal and wooden planks. More anarchist symbols and disturbing sentences. Mysterious enough where when Clementine interacts with it, she questions if the kids are actually hiding something. So what is beyond this gate? Is it just another part of the school, maybe a section outside of the safe zone, or something that we were never supposed to find? We need to find out more. The first thing I tried, and what comes across as extremely suspicious, is that the kids don't mention this gate at any point. We can talk to literally everyone on this first night, and they're all either distracted or we simply lack the option to call them out. It's like everyone's in on some sort of elaborate cover-up.
Not to be, like, rude, but, you know, bye.
Of course, resources become available throughout the game to help us narrow down where this leads, as well as a plausible motive for why they concealed it. Firstly, we can kind of see over the gate if we stand far enough back. The trees in the background already credit the theory that this was once used as a separate entrance into the forest, and that the kids blocked it off because of the safe zone's ever-continual decrease. That's one possible theory. The kids also say that the walker-infested greenhouse is located near the school. The map that Violet shows us in episode 2 proves this. It's on the right hand side also. However, this is where things start to get very weird. The same map depicts Erickson's as much bigger than what we assumed. The gate is located here, so this doesn't lead into the forest, it just leads to another section of the school. The greenhouse is still within the school grounds, and the only entrance to the school is the courtyard. Overall, this raises more questions than answers. I understand blocking off a dangerous exit to the school to stop walkers sneaking in, but they instead decided to block off 2/3 of the school for presumably no reason. Well, here's the answer. The Walking Dead wiki lists the Erickson school buildings in detail. At the bottom, there's mention of a burnt down section, in quote, a building of unknown origin located next to the admin building that burnt down at some point before Clementine and AJ's arrival. This isn't a reference to the crumbling bell tower that's purpose was obvious. Instead, it's referring to the building past the gate. One of the kids burnt it down out of hatred. We don't know why exactly, but my theory is that this is where the faculty used to punish, or rather abuse the students. Because why else would they do this? By accident? Well, it's quite difficult to burn down a building by mistake without electricity in the apocalypse. No, unfortunately, on top of being left alone to fend for themselves, the adults of the school were guilty of the most atrocious crimes against the most innocent. Historically, North American boarding schools, especially for troubled youth, have been sites of violation against its students. 2 pieces of writing in particular illustrate the trauma felt by Marlon as well as others. Stay strong, and Marlon was here. I think the reason why none of the children talk about this anymore is self-explanatory. Of course, there's another theory that this was intended to house the cut content of the game. The inaccessible buildings include the dining room, the morgue, the playground, and the gymnasium. But I prefer the former from a storytelling perspective and because it makes the most sense to me personally. It also ties into the next mystery quite well.
And the loser is Tennessee. What's something you've never told anyone because you were afraid they'd make fun of you?
This mystery is one of, if not the most notorious on this list. Since the very beginning of the game, 10 being the first of the Erickson students that we find in the hallway, he's seen with burn marks across the right side of his face. He doesn't tell us why. We can't ask him why. Similarly to the previous mystery, we're given very little to work with, although many interpretations have surfaced over time, so let's go over them now. The first is that he and his sisters orchestrated a fire that burnt down his family house, hence their simultaneous departure to Erickson's. I always found it weird that 10 and both of his sisters are at the school at the same time. Another branch of this theory is that only Minnie and Sophie burnt down their house, and 10 wanted to be with his sisters at all times, so he was sent alongside them. This would never happen in real life because if this was the reason for why he got injured, I doubt that Ericksons or their family would allow them to stay together because of their dangerous influence over him. In episode 2, 10 visits AJ and Clementine in the dorms while they await the vote. He's holding a firefighter figurine in his hand and says this.
I figured you'd be afraid, with everyone all upset. But you were brave last night, like a firefighter.
This at least tells us that 10 was rescued by a fireman, explaining his admiration for them. Fortunately, he didn't have a hot iron pressed against his face in the forbidden building. Instead, we've narrowed it down to a fire before the apocalypse, as protection services weren't available from day one. Since the burning of the Ericksons building occurred after the outbreak started, in retaliation to the adult staff leaving, it's safe to say that 10 did not get his scars from Ericksons. And even though this is the case, I also want to say that Omar is seen cooking outside, so there's a small possibility that the building was burnt down from a kitchen fire initially. It just has no connection to 10's injury. The conclusion I've reached is that he was around 4 years old when he burnt down his home, forcing his family to send all of their children to Ericksons, mostly for 10's safety as he was so young. His adoptive older sisters, Minnie and Sophie, were appointed as his guardians to make sure he didn't harm himself further. I'll talk more about 10's backstory in another mystery, but I think that's good enough for me.
You guys want to know why I got sent here?
Willie, please, no.
Chronic masturbation.
Throughout the game, we are given more insight on why some of the kids were sent to Erickson's. Violet/Lewis share their story during the party in episode 3. Lewis caused his parents to get a divorce out of spite after not receiving singing lessons. He spent his dad's credit card on hotel rooms and jewellery as a ploy to facilitate their breakup. Violet let her grandmother off herself while watching television in the same room. She sat on the floor beside her for hours until her parents came home. When asked why she didn't call the ambulance, she shrugged and said it's not like she was going anywhere. Quite brutal, but she was only 11 years old at the time. The last character who kind of shares their story is Ruby. She reads out her report file at the same party. This isn't why she was sent to Erickson's, but it gives us a pretty good idea. She used to have uncontrollable fits of anger, and even physically assaulted the senior faculty on several occasions. As for the other kids, their stories don't match or we aren't given any information regarding their past. Let's start with Willie, since he's the most popular by far. He says that he was sent here for
masturbation.
But that doesn't make any sense because he's listed at only 12 years old in the present, the same age as 10. So before the outbreak he would have been like age 4. We can assume that he was only joking and didn't disclose the real reason, but why would he lie? And more importantly, why would a 4-year-old be sent here all by himself in the first place? As mentioned before, 10 had his sisters to keep him safe, and I have theorized that the aftermath of the house fire simply put too much strain on the parents, which was ultimately the reason why all 3 kids were transferred collectively. Reading his wiki article only repeats what we know, that it's unclear whether or not he was joking, and that he was born in 1999, like 10. But by researching his post-apocalypse entries, we can start to put something together. We know that he was close friends with Mitch, and it says here that Mitch looked after Willie after the adults left. We can see them sharpening weapons together, talking about explosives and normal childlike activities such as this. So is it possible that Willie was sent here for similar reasons, and they became friends through a shared interest in explosives? I believe so because of one detail. Soon after Mitch dies, Willie starts work on the Mitch's masterpiece bomb. It's created off camera mostly, but it's implied that he created it with the help of 10. I know he was only 4 or 5 when he was sent here, but it's more likely that he was obsessively experimenting with dangerous substances from this young age, rather than
masturbation.
Asim is one of the few characters who doesn't talk much in general. We first meet him while out disposing of walkers in the forest. and unlike Willie, he just seems like a normal, nice kid. He likes to write in his journal and has a crush on Ruby of all people.
You've got a crush on Ruby?
Violet and Brody exist, and you choose her. He even expresses his disgust for Clementine at the dinner table party.
So that means you're killing...
This is amazing.
A sim!
Oh, thank God. What? You'd rather die than marry or flip Clem. No.
His relationship preferences are troubled enough, but I doubt his bad taste is what made his family disown him and send him here of all places. A developer confirms that Asim was guilty of starting fires. The same dev states that Asim's character was originally going to look much different. For one, he was supposed to be bisexual, but this was later scrapped, most likely because it intervened with the Lewis relationship path if I had to guess, and he proposed a new post-apocalypse currency, which was jars of salt. Brody is even more mysterious. She's very nice, intelligent, and doesn't strike me as the type of person who would study at a school for troubled kids. It's possible that characters like Brody were much worse when they were children, as opposed to 18 to 20-year-old adults. Ruby is a perfect example of this. We do, however, witness Brody have anxiety attacks, and her coping mechanism seems to be uncontrollable swearing.
I just can't. I won't. Just not again. Fuck!
She obviously suffers from severe anxiety, to the point where she's unable to control herself under pressure. As a child, I can only imagine how much more serious this would have been if paired with aggression and violence. Omar has the least amount of lines out of all of the school kids. His dedication to cooking and using rabbit foods as lucky charms indicating a possible obsession with animals, and not in a good way. I'd love to say that he's just another violent kid like Marlon or Ruby, but with the lack of substantial evidence, this theory makes sense to me. The other possibility that's not nearly as dark as this is that his lack of sociability was the reason. If that's the case, then it would be heartbreaking, and his parents are horrible people for separating their 7-year-old child over nothing more than being shy.
We're gonna get him back.
You don't know what it's like out there. It's a bloodbath. One community against another. From Richmond to the coast. Back at the Delta, we're at war. With some really sick fucks who make me look like the Virgin Mary.
The Delta are a large militant group consisting of small raider communities, or cities as Abel called them. During Season 4, they're involved in an ongoing war with Richmond, as well as other settlements stretching as far as the East Coast. All we know is that the Delta were, and still are so desperate for new soldiers, that they once sent a scouting unit to Ericsson's long before we showed up. It's here where Marlon gave up Minnie and Sophie in exchange for his own safety. Since they knew where the school was, the kids' safety didn't last long, as we coincidentally bump into Lily and Abel immediately after being kicked out. I'll give a brief overview on Lily for a second. She is now a lieutenant of the Delta, and leader of one of said communities, a transportation ship codenamed Rockingham, real name the SS Stuart Fitzgerald. This is the only faction of the Delta that's still in operation, besides the main base, leaving me to wonder where the other communities are, who's in charge, and if Rockingham's collapse marked the death of the entire organisation. I was supposed to talk about David in my previous video in the missing persons list for New Frontier, but I thought that this theory was so good that he deserved an upgrade. David has one ending in Season 3 where he lives. He leaves his community and his family behind and wanders off by himself. At this point, the New Frontier is effectively disbanded, leaving David to seek out another meaning in life.
Maybe it doesn't matter to you.
Legacy, David. It's all anyone leaves behind. Figure out the kind you want.
His end goal was always simple. He wanted to be a soldier above anything else, and he didn't consider himself anything else. After he left Richmond, could he have created another large militant group around the same area, using his experience from the New Frontier and his past to aid him? It would also align with what Abel said in the basement, that they're at war with the most evil people imaginable, and as strict as David is, even he tried his hardest to persecute Joan after the things she did. I also believe that David would have liked Lily and would have granted her the rank of lieutenant. On the other hand, I don't think that he would have approved of child kidnapping, although I will argue that most of the school kids are aged 18 to 20 by this point in the story. Minnie and Sophie were likely young adults when they were taken by the Delta, so for that reason I like to believe that David is affiliated with them in some way. As for the ship, this was a devastating loss for the Delta. but Lily still uses present tense in this scene.
Without reinforcements, my people will lose their war. They'll die because of you.
She also says that she would take Clementine to the Delta on the ship, so it's definitely out there somewhere. Really though, the fall of this outpost would have directly caused its fragmentation, even if a few members are still alive, and whether or not the Delta was a place where she could fall back to.
I'll find my own way. Next time you need help, ask someone else.
This time around, we aren't talking about an extensive list of sub-characters who were lost forever because of a writing inconsistency or because no one really cares about them. In Season 4, there's only really 2 characters that go missing, both of which being major characters, and their lives are dependent on a single decision near the end of the game. Let's talk about Lily first, since we're following up on the previous mystery anyway. After we choose to keep her alive, she kills missing character number 2 and the ship explodes before we can react. She's found a few minutes later at the dock floating down the river on a supply raft, but at this point her fate is sealed. Because of Clementine's terrible aim, she rides off into the sunset even if we shoot her all 3 times. So, what's next for her? Did she try and regroup with the other members of the Delta, or did she try and make it on her own? There's many different opinions on the events that followed. Personally, I believe that Lily did not go back to the Delta because she agrees with this dialogue option.
After this, there won't be anything left to go back to.
Good! You deserve to be alone.
Maybe. To be honest, it's easier by yourself. Nothing lasts, Clementine. Not friends, not love, not the place you call home.
The words "nothing lasts" also betrays her dejection following the fall of her home. I also need to point out that Lily was responsible for Rockingham's longevity and the overall stability of her crew, according to her leadership role. I don't think that David or whoever was in charge of the Delta would have been happy with her, to say the least. The most intelligent thing to do in this situation is to play dead and make as much distance as you can. This way she can start fresh and at least survive without a possible target on her back. As for her chances of surviving out in the wilderness, quite high actually. I mean, Lee left her in a much more difficult situation back in Season 1. At this point, she was more inexperienced, still coping with the loss of her dad. She had absolutely no food, water, or a weapon to protect herself with. Her first reaction was to dart into the forest, that's how scared she was. On this occasion, it's nighttime, which I agree is extremely dangerous considering the amount of walkers in the area, but she still has the river, her crossbow, and whatever was in these crates to assist her along the way. They look similar to the supplies that we can burn to distract the soldiers in the same episode. They're also visible in this scene here, but according to Clementine, they don't contain anything, they're just sheets of metal and wood apparently, rendering them completely useless for Lily. Either way, I'm 100% sure that she's alive, but tell me if you disagree. The opposite choice leads us to the James goes missing path. We tell AJ to shoot Lily 9 times in the face. James gets mad about it for some reason, later becoming physically violent, threatening to kidnap AJ in the cave, threatening to break Clementine's legs for trying to rescue him, among other things. Just to rant for a second, I can't stand this guy. Even in episode 2, he's just extremely annoying to the point where I want Lily to dispose of him for making such weird requests to us throughout the game and generally having an extremely idiotic and dangerous belief system. He also says that he killed an innocent child for nothing more than expressing empathy, so yeah, this guy's like on par with Bonnie for me. He makes Ben look like Lee in comparison. Anyway, after a heated argument, he says that he'll find his own way and to ask someone else for help next time we need it. There's another path where he fends off the incoming walkers before we're separated, the only difference being his level of hatred towards Clementine and by extension the school, which I'll discuss later. For the remainder of the game, his fate is unknown, although the same developer, Kent, states that James is alive, remaining in the forest near Erickson's but is no longer cordial with her. There's no mention of the other path, which is weird to me since both outcomes are drastically different in the level of mutual trust. Maybe James stayed close by in hopes of abducting AJ outside the walls. It wouldn't be out of place for him. In all seriousness, there's one piece of evidence that makes me believe that the outcome where James remains in the forest is a reference to the nice ending and not the bad ending. James doesn't drop the mask unless you make him hate you, and the only way that James was able to survive with his belief of not killing walkers was by blending in. He could have never survived in the forest for long without his mask, so it's possible that he died in this scenario. That's just a small theory of mine, but it's something I suppose. In summary, James is fine in one scenario, a walker in one of them, and is most likely deceased in the other. Another thing to add is that making a walker skin from scratch without infecting himself would have been difficult. With no place to shelter and without anyone watching his back, it was unlikely that he made another one, even if he knew how to. Here's the big one. I'm just going to dive straight in since we all know what happened. I think most people would agree that Clementine was on the brink of death during the barn scene. Yellow eyes, unable to stand, walkers closing in from every possible angle. The closest reference we have is of course Lee from season 1 again. So what the heck happened? How is she alive? How did she get back to the school? It's the ending that has been contested from day one, with many contradictory theories over the events that followed. We need to talk about each and every possibility before giving my final conclusion at the end. Starting with the most popular, this one surfaced very early in the game's lifespan and is generally the most favoured given that a writer of season 4 introduced it, Michael Kirkbridge, with his letter titled How I Protected Clem by Alvin Jr. I'll show a shot of it here since I'm not reading the entire thing. I just want to say that this is not canon in any way, more so his own speculations on the ending that are admittedly credible since he wrote the game. Basically, according to him, AJ cut off her leg before cauterizing it with the completely sterile and safe axe blade covered in walker blood. He used a rope to tourniquet her leg and proceeded to pick up Clementine and place her into this red wheelbarrow. He killed all of the walkers inside the barn, threw blood on Clementine to protect her from more walkers, and pushed her to the school. For me, it's quite unrealistic. Immediately, this axe could have never been used as an instrument for cauterization. I was being sarcastic if you didn't notice. It's actually hilarious how dangerous and stupid this is, and if Clem wasn't dead already, this would have killed her even faster. Such a tool would have made the infection even worse and caused more severe tissue damage to her upper leg. In a real life situation, cauterizing a wound thermally is kind of a myth in modern practice. It's done medically via silver nitrate, and in extreme surgical cases, electricity. The smartest thing for him to do was to not cut off her leg in the first place, to stop the bleeding as is and quickly rush her back to the school where Ruby had the resources to do this safely. Violet does say that the school is nearby, but I'm 99% sure that AJ would have been too slow to save Clementine if we're following this scenario. I don't doubt that AJ could have dragged Clementine all the way back to Erickson's before she died. Clementine dragged Lee inside the police station without the help of a wheelbarrow. Speaking of which, I should have included that mystery in my first video, but oh well. But reversing the bacterial infection was way too late at this point. Remember, AJ had to kill every walker inside the barn. This would have taken ages on top of everything else, so for that reason I'll propose a second option, what I see as the only logical solution for how she made it out alive. AJ swings the axe, misses and hits LaHaye instead. He cries and tells her once again that he cannot do it. Violet comes back with a few more people. AJ's rope is used to stop the bleeding. Violet and Lewis make quick work of the walkers inside the barn. Clem's then rushed back to Erickson's on the horse carriage they stole from the Delta. After arriving home, Ruby amputates her leg and cleans it well, and that's it. Quite believable as far as Telltale goes and all within a reasonable time frame. I think the reason why I'm so skeptical of Telltale deaths is purely because of Kenny's disappearance in season 1 and the fact that Clementine survives this. As for the yellow eyes that are similar to Lee's, I think Clementine was just going into shock due to blood loss and not the infection. The community have pointed out that the bite was actually below the axe wound, and because the walker infection spreads through the bloodstream, this bought her enough time to survive the amputation without it spreading around her body.
A group of survivors out beyond the old safe zone. Some kind of caravan.
Are they bad people?
At the end of the game, Clementine and Lewis/Violet discuss a caravan full of survivors outside of the safe zone. They're a large group of around 15 people, and AJ is trusted to scout them out in case they're dangerous. It's obviously meant to be ambiguous, demonstrating Erickson's willingness to grow and accept new members. When asked, this is what a dev said. Apparently it wasn't supposed to be taken too seriously. because it's my job to take everything too seriously. Who are these 15 people? This kind of reminds me of that family at the end of season 2 who we never see again. As always, here's a few theories. This sequence takes place directly after the flashback where Clementine says this.
Can't go back to Richmond. This whole area is a war zone.
And a few minutes later, we're at the dinner table discussing a vehicle full of people resembling a fleeing community. Automatically, I'm comparing this to Kenny's RV, which was an escape vehicle in season 1. Only this time around, there's twice as much people to credit this even further. So, could this have been Javier, his family, and some friend escaping Richmond? The location matches up well. They used the same road as Clementine, presumably, and we have their motive. I also claimed in my last video that Javi wasn't responsible for Richmond, so his best bet was to ditch the war and escape with his family. It's a good theory, but there's a few more I want to talk about first. It's possible that this was another community like Commonwealth or Alexandria from the comics and the TV show. It's the most common theory from what I've read. There's no evidence to support this unlike the last one, but I suppose it's conceivable. There is a long list of comic communities who it could have been, so a cameo appearance isn't out of the question. Of course, this could always be Kenny and the survivors of Wellington. Although a portion of season 2 takes place in West Virginia, Wellington is way up north in Michigan. It's quite far away, but if they travelled south through Ohio, they would have eventually followed the Ohio River using a road adjacent to the school. It's a long shot, but remember, Kenny's priority was Fort Lauderdale in Florida, so southeast was the direction that he would have travelled. He likely came back to Wellington, saw that it was in ruins, befriended a few survivors to help him find a working vehicle, and hit the road. Tell me what you think about this one, because I'm about 50-50 on whether or not these are characters who we've seen before, or if they're complete strangers after all. Too bad we'll never know the answer to this question.
We took the vote. You have to leave.
Don't we get to vote? I vote that we stay.
That's not how it works.
It's unsettling just how close Clem and AJ were from being banished from the school forever, only to show up one day later like nothing ever happened. This is another entry in the hypothetical what-if scenarios that I include in almost every video. It all started with Ben's existence in season 1 because I just needed to insult him for a few minutes, but this one needs to be talked about more because season 4 could have been much different. Just a quick summary before I begin. After AJ shoots Marlon in the head, we are democratically expelled. Everyone except Violet or Lewis, depending on who you appeal to. Asim and Ten want us to leave, so we do. We are escorted back to the main road and left to fend for ourselves. Lily and Abel come back to recruit more soldiers. Long story short, we escape, but AJ gets shot and we have no choice but to return. Over the course of the episode, we start to convince the other kids to let us stay while AJ recovers from the gunshot until it's unanimously uncontested. The hypothetical is this. What would have happened if AJ didn't get injured, if we were sent back into the wilderness with no mode of transport? How long would they have survived, and what would have season 4 looked like? It's uncertain which direction they would have taken, but in episode 1 we're shown a map of Ericsson's and its surrounding area. Unfortunately, this isn't a north-south map, so we can't pinpoint a direction. We only have the flow of the Ohio River to use as reference. Typically this would be northeast, or a 40-degree angle. The path that we use to reach the main road is here, through the hunting grounds. We can confirm this in another scene where we are escorted through the forest. The only other path named the Forest Path takes us to the old shack where we fish with Brody and Violet. This is also where Zombie 10 is found at the end of the game, the map indicating that it doesn't lead anywhere else. It ends abruptly, unlike the other one which extends outside of the safe zone. When we approach the end of the safe zone, Violet looks to her left, shrugs her shoulder, and says this.
The road's that way.
Left in this case is north, according to the river, so Clem and AJ would have travelled north. They weren't given any supplies either. Lewis gives AJ his gun back and that's about it. None of their backpacks contain anything that useful. I know that Clem and AJ were experienced, but they were never in a situation where they didn't have their car until this point. You can argue that in season 3 she was in a similar situation by herself and without a vehicle, but I disagree. She was residing nearby at Prescott and didn't have to care for a 5-year-old kid. It's not comparable in the slightest. This is a horrible situation to be in considering the walker population of the area. Clem and AJ needed to find shelter as soon as possible or pull a Russell and hike down the road through the dead of night. Eventually they could have hitchhiked, but I don't think there's much traffic 8 years into the apocalypse. Russell's story takes place 184 days in, barely half a year, so yeah, no one was driving down this road, which is potentially a good thing depending on how you look at it. The rest of this hypothetical is so cryptic that I don't even know where to begin. She could have changed her mind and thought returning to Richmond was suddenly a good idea. Maybe they stayed by themselves for a few more years. Either way, I'm glad that they let her back in because this part is quite upsetting, and let's be honest, it's only really AJ's fault.
Oh, here. Take this. When he's old enough, you make him wear it. It'll keep the sun out of his eyes. That's important.
Kenny's hat was given to us at the end of Season 2 in one specific ending. Contrary to the theory that it's never seen again and that the devs didn't want to include it as it conflicts with the other endings, it can be seen once in A New Frontier, assuming we followed through on that ending and have a save file. She has a nightmare of Ellington's fall. Edith comes into the room and tells her to pack her things and escape. Here, we can choose to take Kenny's hat from the shelf and run into the forest where the story proceeds. Now, it's from this point forth where Kenny's hat isn't seen or mentioned again. The first thing I did was compare the backpacks from Season 4 and this scene, which takes place 5 or so years in the past. Surprisingly, they're the same backpack, confirming that she didn't lose the backpack itself, thus her belongings inside. I believe that one of 3 things happened here. And by the way, I'm talking about in-universe ambiguity over developer intent. Just so you know, obviously this wasn't meant to be anything, but it's fun to hypothesize. Number 1 is that she or AJ lost it. AJ is a kid and kids lose things easily. It's plausible that Clementine gifted AJ Kenny's hat when he became old enough to wear it. This is exactly what Kenny said, so she took his advice, but he lost it soon afterwards. The second theory is that they traded it for something. Anything really. Kenny says that it's important for keeping the sun out of your eyes, which is extremely valuable in the apocalypse combined with the cover and protection it provides. Clementine also wears her own hat to hide her hair so it cannot be grabbed, which is arguably even more useful. While out in the wilderness between Seasons 2 and 3, she could have traded it with a member of the New Frontier or a group of strangers. The third and final possibility is that she burnt it in a fire, similar to how she burns the photograph and the drawing at the beginning of Season 2. This one is more upsetting, but we've seen her do this before with other sentimental items. She was also much further north than when she was with Krista, so she could have had to use it as fuel to keep AJ alive. I just wish that Kenny's hat returned in Season 4. It would have brought us back to his farewell scene in Season 2, which I still believe that whole ending was the best thing in the series, on par with Lee's death in Season 1. Also, the finale where AJ fishes Clementine's hat out of the river and she tells him to keep it, it would have been much better if it was Kenny's hat, but his legacy lives on either way, I suppose. This is a small post-edit. The next mysteries are bonuses that I wasn't able to make much out of. One of them was originally going to be mystery number 6, but I decided to change it later.
What happened then, Minerva?
I killed her.
What the fuck?
The character, Sophie, is a whole mystery in of itself. Her story is one of heartbreak and obscurity, owing to the fact that she's the only significant character who we never see in person. She died long before we had the chance to meet her, trying to escape the Delta with Minerva before being captured and killed. While at Ericsson's, she was their primary supply runner alongside Minerva and Marlon, and that's essentially the extent of the information we're given. We can, however, find pictures of her in Clementine and AJ's room, formerly the sisters' room, as we're told by Violet. There's a secret photo album in the bedside cabinet, showcasing her and her siblings' lives before the apocalypse. I'm not sure who this third girl is in the last photograph. I thought it was just her best friend from school, but she looks a bit like Violet. Maybe Violet deliberately got sent here so she could stay with Minerva. I mean, she's content with staying at the Delta with Minerva if you let her get kidnapped, so it's definitely something that she would do. This could also just be a very early photograph at Ericsson's, but I doubt it. It's in the boat where Lily discloses Sophie's final days in detail, how she convinced her sister to help her steal a raft, how she made her kill Sophie to pledge loyalty to the Delta. But it's the way in which Minnie tells her story, and her attitude towards Ten especially, that makes me question if Sophie is actually dead, or if her sister lied about killing her for protection. On top of the fact that we don't see it on camera, she could have easily just told Sophie to run off into the woods instead of going back to Ericsson's because she was aware of the upcoming ambush in an attempt to recruit the entire school. It's a cool theory that I believed for a while, but there's one sentence at the bridge which pretty much debunks this. When Minerva tries to kill Ten and take him to see his family, she includes Sophie in the same sentence, meaning she was either responsible for her death or knows that she died without it being shown on screen.
We're gonna go be with Mom and Dad and Sophie.
She has no reason to lie here, and with that, the case of Sophie is closed before it even opened. I did find it weird upon first playing Season 4, assuming that Sophie was an important character who we were supposed to save. To hear about her death always seemed anticlimactic, lacking much dramatic effect. Like, okay, I don't even know who she is besides 2 brief sentences. In my opinion, they should have killed off Violet or Lewis instead to emphasize the weight of that decision. It makes the outcome of the story that much more hard-hitting and emotional. Like if the Tripp versus Ava choice from Season 3 was actually decent.
Hey, over here! Follow me! And that's how you school a walker.
How did they manage to suspend these 2,000-pound boulders 10 feet in the air? Easily enough where they proceeded to do it 10 more times, all for the sake of killing one walker at a time, not to mention a severe risk of injuring themselves or worse. It would have taken the combined efforts of all of the kids, and even then I don't think it's possible. Maybe Minerva, who's not even at the school anymore, Marlon and Omar, Mitch and Lewis maybe. The only theory I believe is that they somehow summoned the power of Kenny, Lee and Javier all at the same time. I don't know, something that's disturbing though, and I was going to include this but just didn't get around to unfortunately, is the number of deceased kids at Erickson's. They're briefly mentioned at the party but we're given nothing regarding their cause of death. I just hope that these rocks didn't fall and hurt anyone walking past. That wraps up the final season of The Walking Dead. There were so much mysteries this time around, and I was so excited to make this one from day one. By the way, thanks again to everyone who's been watching since Volume 1, or if this is your first one. If I do return to The Walking Dead, it would be for a one-off mystery, or a compilation of mysteries that I forgot across the series. That could be fun actually, because there's a lot of things that I missed and I could lump them all into one. There's also the Michonne/400 Days video. I can't say I've done everything until I do those, so I guess I'll have to make that at some point.
Well, wish in one hand, shit in the other.